media, and it's that awareness, it's that brand awareness. So let's kind of start with let's start from the beginning. Let's start with, a lot of you folks have your own brand new brands that you're building from scratch. So let's start from a I've got a new brand, and they bring it to you, Jeff, and what do you do to get things going?
We're actually, we're working with some folks here on this very process. And the first question that I have is around the basic brand building exercises, which is, a brand is who you are, who you want to be, how you are perceived, how much of that information do you have. I think it's important for us anyway in our process, there's lots of ways to get there, I suppose, is the word uncover. We're not looking to add a layer of marketing. We're looking to explore, to slow down in order to speed up eventually, to take a thorough, deep look of what are we trying to do. Everything that we try to do, we try to boil down to a single word in terms of what drives people. The real question is not ultimately who you want to be or who you think you are, but how you're perceived by the audience. And ultimately that, all of that becomes our brand. What we're looking for is a core, authentic hope. It's always about hope. People want to find a better version of themselves by virtue of our brand. And so what is that hope that we offer? As an example, there's some great marketing literature about the Jeep and how they created, they decided their key was freedom, and they tied everything to the Jeep to the idea of a horse, and that's why the round headlights, because the idea of freedom was extremely important. So what's the hope that we're trying to provide our core target? I know there's lots of them. It forces us to deliver a single word. A lot of times those words need to be unpacked. That's a term from a writing coach here in town called Tom Spauenbauer. He's amazing. But unpack the word is really what we do when we're looking for core narrative. So as an example, by virtue of this delicious beer, do I feel like I'm more popular? Is that my hope? Is it about organic and all natural, and so my hope is that I feel approved? Is it about freedom? Is it about, what's your core narrative about? And if you can articulate it down to a single word of understanding, then there's something to really work with, to build on.
So I just wanted to check with you guys and make sure that the audio was still good. We moved outside. We have a huge heat wave going on here, and it's in like the mid to upper 80s, which is kind of bizarre for April in Portland. So we decided the outdoor arena might be a good place. So I just want to make sure that the wind noise and that kind of stuff, and I didn't mean to, yes, we were staring at the sun because we had to flip because the camera was getting blown out, so a bit spotty. Sorry about that. So yeah, the idea of understanding that core, somebody's unmuted. All right, there we go.
You guys have questions? I'd love to answer questions instead of babble at you. I'm happy to babble though for as long as we have.
Does anyone have any questions about their brand and how they might go about setting it up? Oh, this is Jeff Selin from Dojo Agency. He's a brand guru that I work with here in town who knows and has done a lot of brand work with some big and little brands. And I've watched him from scratch build brands, and we've worked with some other bigger brands as well. So
their focus is really around communications. So how do you communicate your narrative, your story to your target audience? And the way I like to talk about it with our clients a lot, our customers, is the way to really connect deeply and meaningfully with your target audience is to connect with them in a deep, meaningful way. It's not a marketing trick. We have to do the work necessary to build the community super fans that will love our brand, that will promote our brand.
All right, we've got a question here. Are there other emotional drivers we should think about aside from avoidance of fear and offering hope?
Hope and fear is the basic driving factor, right? So just like in storytelling, what drives story is conflict. So there are lots of emotional drivers, though, and they would be different for each brand. What we're looking for, emotional drivers, so today we separate rational drivers from emotional drivers. Rational drivers are all the things that most of the time retailers speak to about, why are you the best? They say all of the things that are actually things that commoditize you, that are the opposite of brand. They say price, service, location, timing, season, size, all these kind of things, selection. They're all important and they're all part of the brand, but they're the rational drivers of the brand. In other words, because it's convenient for your customer, they will purchase, but if it was convenient elsewhere, they would purchase elsewhere. There's no reason they're coming to you other than by virtue of they walked by. That might be enough to sustain lots of business if you have the right location. But what we hope for is, why brand was developed was in a commoditized market, how do we stand out? And so the emotional drivers, why do people purchase? Hope is just a descriptor. There are many different kinds of emotional drivers. I may want, it's always around seeing an improved version of myself. If we're sticking to beer, the classic advertising around beer is the party, right? I'll be popular. All the girls will like me. I just cracked open a beer. That works. That's not a bad way to go. Certainly for a younger demographic, it's spot on. That is the hope that they're looking for. It's different, but we were talking with the local brewery whose brand is very tied to cycling and cycling culture, and we were exploring what does that mean and what does that really look like. And there's always been, history, especially in European cycling, of attachment to beer and cycling. And what we found, the hope and the driver there that we thought through was that it's really about I earned the beer. I earned this. I worked my ass off. And there's also an attachment to freedom of riding. And so we try to find a single core narrative. And then also it's about being authentic, but it's also about weighing this in the marketplace, right? Is this something that we can own in the marketplace? And if those two things meet, we can sell a lot of beer, as it turns out.
Is there a point where a brand can be overplayed, i.e. going local?
I think that sales messages can be played, and then ultimately those affect your brand. We've been doing some different research, and there's a bunch of stuff out there that's more in depth from like Pew Internet and things like. But where we look at sales mechanisms versus branding, loyalty, and brand metrics. So we know that we can sacrifice brand equity to buy a sale. So for instance, you have a beautiful website, everybody loves your website. Now you're going to stick a big fat phone number on the front of it. Every time someone comes, the ad appears, the phone number appears. People are aggravated, they don't like it. However, you'll get more phone calls and you'll make more sales. There's acceptance in this, like if you guys do distribution and you end up doing a lot of online sales, during certain holiday seasons, the frequency and the marketing noise, people can accept it. I expect to see a lot more coupons in my inbox during Christmas. It's okay, but you have to, every location, every brand, every sort of style and audience might be a little bit different.
Yeah, I heard it's a little bit of a side note, but I wanted to get this in. I saw, or I heard an interesting interview about some research that was done, and I believe it was in Cambridge. And I could be wrong on that, but basically the point of the research was these high-value brands and salespeople actually being rude to the customer, and that actually led to greater sales numbers. And so they actually did a kind of controlled experiment about this, they came to the point that the brands that were these luxury brands were the party that kind of everybody wanted to be invited to. And by creating that kind of friction and being a little bit more rude to them and, you know, kind of being a little more aloof, it actually created that urgency to want to buy. So there's some real interesting psychology in how you position the brand as far as the perceived value versus, you know, your actual presentation. So in understanding how you want to position yourself, and if we go back and we look at the videos of Reverend Nat, he talked a lot about, you know, he created that whole other brand of the Cascadia cider for the sheer fact that he needed, and what he called it was a Tuesday night cider. So he said he would do market research at the end caps. He would go there. He would watch these people look at the ciders. He would see them reach for his cider and say, "This is an awesome, amazing cider," and put it back and go grab something else because it was a Tuesday night. So it's understanding how your brand is perceived and how it's perceived in a certain way.
There's some great questions here.
Yes,
I wanted
let's
to answer.
jump into.
Christian, I'm just looking at your question here about, you know, in a sophisticated craft beverage market, and an addendum.
Let me read it for the other
Sure.
other camera. In developed sophisticated craft beverage market like Portland, how would you recommend a startup brew pub should approach differentiating itself? As an addendum to the question, let's assume that you are largely competing for the same demographics with beers, bars, beer-focused restaurants, etc.
There's a classic marketing book that I like, that I got some of these core nuggets from. It's just Marketing Warfare, but don't let the title scare you. It's quite interesting. It's a classic book, but they talk about different ways to look at and segment markets and how you would approach a market. And in this case, they would refer to this, you know, how do you differentiate yourself, is you find a guerrilla marketing tactic. And in this case, guerrilla marketing does not refer to, you know, sending, you know, slapping postcard windshields and these kind of things. What it means is you need to kind of claim a hill that's yours that nobody else can claim, or at the very least, the people who can afford to won't bother trying to take your hill because it's really not worth it to them. And there's a lot of great examples. I don't have any at the top of my head for craft brewing, I apologize, but you know, in automobile industry, for instance, Rolls-Royce, in fact, this is right out of that book, I believe, is a classic guerrilla marketing. You know, it's super high-end. Not a lot of people buy Rolls-Royce. If you're going to buy a super high-end car, you're going to buy a Rolls-Royce, and nobody will bother making a car that expensive because they just won't, you know. Powell's bookstore here in town is a perfect example where location is often the best guerrilla marketing tactic. So what you need to do in order to claim kind of like immediately, you know, we are differentiating ourselves, is to know, you know, it's a brew pub, so it's likely location will be very important. You know, you got to draw a circle around your brew pub, and what are you going to tell everybody in your neighborhood? How are you going to attract them to you? How are you going to be a part of that? The brew pub we were just talking with earlier about cycling put their brew pub on they call it the bike bar, one of them, and they put it right in the middle of a bike path. You know, that's pretty directly saying we are all about cycling. We're on the bike path. We love bike commuters.
Yeah, the interior is all designed with bike parts, and there's all sorts of
but even more than that,
semblance of.
Yeah, and even more than that, the backyard is like 50 bike racks that are filled every night, especially in the summertime. They did a great job, but they did a great job differentiating themselves. Now, lots and lots of beer connects to cycling, so marketing as a brand, it's not that big of a deal. But as a brew pub, you know, this is our location. This is why we're doing this. It worked well for them. I think that it's really important to remember that in brand, people, I think, when we're talking about brand right now, we're not talking about how pretty your packaging is. Yes, lots of people will buy because the packaging is pretty. But we're talking about an experience that people have with your service, with your product, right? I come to let's say, in distribution, this example I think works even better. It's, I go to the my local 7-Eleven or whatever to go buy my craft brew, where it might be, wherever it's distributed for me, and they don't have the beer that I want. Do I buy the beer that they have, or do I leave and go buy the beer I want? That becomes, how many times has your target audience connected with the brand? It might take numerous times. They tasted the beer once at a party, they loved it. Their friend bought it, they liked it. They finally brought some home, and it turned out that their best drinking buddy is like in love with the beer, so now they start buying your beer all the time. Or they went to your brew pub a couple of times, and the last time they went, the girlfriend loved it so much, and now they're a fan. Whatever that is for them, their acquaintance with the brand. That's why it's a real estate investment, right? It takes a long
yeah,
time.
brand is a 7-year investment to get things really where you want them to be.
So the real marketing answer about differentiating yourself, it's an impossible question to answer without knowing who you are and who your competitors are. Search for who your competitors are. Look for unique selling propositions, USPs. That's all the standard stuff.
Go back to your audit. Look at what they're doing, what they're saying in social, and these other things that we've done, and figure out it wasn't only what channel did you have an opportunity for. By the way, I'm pretty good progress on the audit and getting that graded. We're getting close. Those should all be done very shortly. But that was the point of the audit, not only to look at the channels and where the channel opportunities reside, but what's the conversation that's going on? Where can you inject yourself? Nobody's talking about, and I keep coming back to like porters or chocolate porters or some sort of variant, specialized beer. I had a sage-infused red IRA the other day at a brew club. It was just completely different, but wonderful. But so finding that flagpole you can stake in the ground and say, this is us, is how we began and formulate, and whether it's because we have this location and it fits within the culture of we're family friendly, or we're we're for bikers, and I suppose you could be for bikers as well as bikers, but that's kind of double-sided, but.
Like this one about the shock value.
Can you talk about using shock value and pushing the envelope of social norms in branding?
Yeah, shock value, really, the word we typically use is just engagement. We want to engage with our fans, and engagement typically means, because there's so much noise out there, the idea is that you're not competing with some other beer. In fact, you're competing with Angry Birds, right? You're competing with Disney. You're competing with Mindshare. And so you need something that's going to stand out and grab people's attention. There's a lot of different strategies depending on what your approach is. In other words, if you need to growth is your strategy. Do you want to grow within one audience? Like, we are going to target people who value organic beer in our location. If you can find, if you know your target, you know how to engage them, and so you can, often if you speak directly to the target, it'll have shock value to everyone who's not your target, which is quite interesting. But shock value just to create engagement is not a bad idea if your only metric for success is brand engagement. Often brand awareness, the most recent example I can think of is the Aflac duck, because we were just talking about it, and it's not a recent example, but recent in my conversations. The Aflac duck is a advertising, it goes into advertising lore. It's like the most brand awareness ever, ever in a campaign history. When they unleashed the Aflac duck initially in testing, everybody said they absolutely hated the duck. And then when they said, what do you remember the most? Everybody said, that stupid duck. And so they kept it, and sure enough, it worked. So if all you're looking for is brand awareness, shock value is fantastic. Or even annoyance, Aflac, 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 But the question that everybody has is, how do you turn engagement into sales? I know how to grow, a bunch of Facebook fans. I know how people follow me on Twitter. How do they become a customer? And that's where pure shock value will no longer work. So what we need to do is engage, but you have to only shock enough to engage them, and then immediately you need to educate them on your brand, your message, your story, and then we need to empower them with a call to action, in whatever it is. Call us, connect with us, check us out. If it's only brand awareness, often we remove call to action. Often we'll drip out something and it's just maybe a URL at the bottom. But eventually, shock value. Now the other thing is, if you're near a college and what you want to do is grab, my fun story. I went to Rutgers in New Jersey, and there was a band called Free Beer, and every bar loved to play them. They put in huge letters, "Free beer tonight." It worked every time. They packed the house. Every college student went there. It was funny, and that's if that's your, you can get away with tons of stuff if that's your scene. That's a fun audience to play to, but they also can see through you right away. You need to be authentic.
Well, I think that one of the kind of, there was a bit of shock to it, but I think one of the best examples late in the last year or so that I've seen is Dollar Shave Club. The video where their CEO, Pop only needed one blade, and he had polio, and they kind of pushed the envelope on kind of like the comedy side of things. And so I think if you're going to use shock value, in my opinion, I would move towards the comedic side of that. To kind of gain, in the end, it became a kind of true to who they are and what they do.
Be the freak out, but not too freaky. That's funny. It's hysterical, actually. I like, this is a great question about tactile aspects of the experience. It's extraordinarily important. My experience with bottles and bottling, in terms of like direct work that we've done recently is more with wine than beer, but it's extraordinarily important. My friend who has a fairly successful wine business, they have big distribution with Costco, spent lots and lots of money researching and deciding the right bottles. And really it came down to that experience of picking it up. What did it feel like? How heavy was it? And the shape and everything too, but absolutely important. And not just tactile, but I love audio signatures as part of a brand. I think music and beer go together so well. I would love to see more beer brands take on music, local musicians, and have audio signatures. I listen to
Sonic branding.
Yeah, sonic branding is just awesome stuff. But the idea just being, it's not always, the brand experience extends to all senses, for sure.
Well, I think when we get into things like sonic branding, it goes beyond just a jingle. It's that emotive quality that your brand can convey, and using music as the way to kind of help get that across.
Another thing that's interesting to maybe talk about is on the inside, having a core brand story doesn't just help express your brand more succinctly to your target audience. It also makes sure that you can control your brand assets with your marketing partners. I'm sure some of you have already experienced this, where you just can't control, like there's so many touch points to a customer, and all of them affect the brand. When somebody calls in, what's the message that they hear if you guys don't pick up the phone? If they go to the website, it goes on and on and on. What about the email newsletter? What about Facebook? What about Twitter? What about YouTube? What about where are people leaving reviews online? Every one of these is a brand touch point that we need to capture, kind of put into a net, and make sure that what we're delivering is on an on-brand experience. That's really easy to talk about, really easy to put in a, here's your brand Bible or whatever. But doing it is quite a challenge.
All right, we've got to get in here. Is there such a thing as too much social media interaction for a company brewery?
Yes.
I follow a lot of different blogs and brewers on Twitter and Facebook. Some seem to strike a nice balance between having a presence and being informative and interesting. Some just seem to be posting for the sake of it, and I find myself getting a bit fatigued with the brand.
Yeah, frequency. That's a huge aspect of all things digital, but brand awareness bumps into frequency, bumps into there's a lot of ways that people try to measure and talk about these ideas. One of them that we've been talking about recently is called NPS, Net Promoter Scoring. It's this idea of your behaviorally people become promoters, detractors, or neutral, and you want to push somebody. Detractors we want to kind of get out of the system. We don't like them. Folks that are neutral we want to turn into promoters of our brand. And so the question is how many times and in what message can you get them from neutral to promoting? And some people will not like being spoken to at all. They'll leave. They'll go off the map. And the question though is, if I need to reach out to my target audience 20 times to get them to come in, is it okay to annoy 100 people if it gives you 6 totally loyal, awesome customers? For a lot of brands, that's what they're looking for. They never want to grow past the one small place. They love it. They just want to they need a couple of more core customers from the neighborhood. There's also a lot of ways, the rational drivers that we spoke about earlier, a lot of times are very important to find ways to sell, right, to connect. So location, timing, pricing, those things are not long-term solutions, but short-term, you can find a lot of ways to connect with people. That becomes another measure of your brand success.
So Brian, I want to follow up on that, and then we'll get to Mary's question. I think you find a lot of oversharing or just kind of like a continual flow in social from brands, and this is really where, on my day job, I kind of spend my day bread and butter is there's not a real plan in and around how they're telling their story, and this will get more class, but it's that idea that you're just sharing for sharing's sake. You're just throwing something out there to be active and be what you think is engaged on social. But the reality is that you don't really have a good plan of communication strategy.
I like the saying that instead of tweeting, do something to tweet about.
All right, Mary asks, can you talk about how you would use your name and logo as part of brand building? What elements should you be focusing on to tie them all together?
It's a great question. It's important to note, most of you probably know this, but your name and your logo, the colors are not your brand, right? They're creative representations of brand attributes that together might be the first time somebody sees you or connects with you. So it's very important. It's a representation. It's an icon. Yeah, it's an icon. There's a book that I recommend to anybody studying brand called The Brand Gap by Marty Newman, who runs an agency called Liquid, or helps run an agency. He's a principal. He was like the president of the AIG. Anyway, his book's called The Brand Gap. You should definitely check it out. He talks about this. No, I'm just typing it. He talks about this a bunch, where what are the actual elements of logo? In fact, the real name is logo type. It's only used if it's typographical. If it's an image, it's an icon. There's some interest. Designers use certain design speak. If you want to geek out on that stuff, it's a fun quick read. But understanding brand is awesome with that book. But this idea, your name and logo for beer matter a lot. Matter a lot more than my business. My business is relationship marketing. It's Jeff and whatever. We call it the dojo. People want to buy beer with a badass logo, and the label matters, and
the bottle matters, the experience.
So what we try to do, it can be really challenging, especially with smaller businesses where the founder is still involved. They haven't transferred into finding a CEO kind of, an actual business. It's a passion project. It's very hard to talk to them about. I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing this on the marketing side if you're working with the founder and the owner. And what we do is focus on strategy first. So if you can determine the strategy, so as an example, if what our core, brand tenet that we want to deliver is around happiness with friends, we, as a community, it's all about that maybe your brew pub is like our friends up in St. John's, where Booze Brews, where it's like the European style ale. It's like you go in and everybody's like, you're friends with everyone even if you don't know anybody. So, and
it's like a more intimate Cheers.
yeah, exactly. But it's going to just depend on how, what if we can provide the strategy first, and then when we get to naming and logo type and these kind of things, you can argue this direction or that direction, but as long as it's on strategy, you kind of go, okay, we're getting somewhere. And in this way, we can go step by step, Instead of talking about your core narrative, because that's this huge monster, let's back up and just talk about the archetype around core narratives. Are you a comedy? Are you a tragedy? Probably none of, maybe a comedy for beer, that would be fun. Are you, the quest, like, are we looking?
Overcoming a monster, the kind of core plot types, yeah.
Yeah, the core plot, and in this way, if they say yes to one core, plot type, you can move forward with a kind of story that, it's the only way to avoid a bunch of people sitting around a table and just arguing about should it be red or blue. It should be red because red is a lucky color for Chinese, and that's what our beer connects to. Or it should be blue because we want to attract a bunch of techie dudes, and blue is like electric blue. These things have to have a feeling to them, and they just pay off on what your core narrative is, what your core brand attribute is. If there's a disconnect, this happens all the time with us, especially for smaller brands. Yeah, all right, so I'll pick on my brother for a second here. He's got a little martial arts school named Echo de Buddha. It's a French name because he had a French teacher, but it they do Japanese martial arts. It's de Buddha Raji. It's just like all this mix of stuff, and you're trying to talk to them about helping them, and it's like, but it has to be a little piece of this and a little piece of that. We call it Taco Bell. It's like, you walk in and they're like, they want a piece of everything thrown in to the mix, and that doesn't work for brand. You have to have, let's put it this way, if you want to be a leader in your corner, it's not going to work. You need what my mentor used to call the SCI, the single clear intention. Everything has to be a single clear intention, and brand especially. That's why if we can boil it down to a single word, the word needs to be unpacked and understood. Happiness, what does that mean? It means being with friends for us, or does that mean something else?
All right, so after you've delivered your message to your customer, what is a good way to measure the effectiveness of your message as far as determining the customer view of your brand as you intend? So there's an entire wing of marketing and research in, market research, where they say, what do you think of blue? Why is blue? What does this touch you? Does this bring something to you? A lot of you guys, this comes when you get to a much larger stage. This is where you move to that much larger scale. When you move from a regional brewer to a national brewer, this might be something you go to. But in the beginning, I think it's a conversation. It's a lot of you talk to your customer and get the sense from them. Is that?
Yeah, well, but I'd also say that the question is correct. The last line is, can it be harmful to your brand? Absolutely. However, earlier we talked about we use this a lot because it's easy to remember, but the 3 E's: engage, educate, and then empower. And there's a 4th E. It's called evolve, and it's really an internal evolution. And your brand will also be evolving and changing because it's going to be growing over 7 years, and your business is going to be changing and evolving based on the economy, based on the news, based on your growth, all kinds of things. So as you grow, your brand should naturally be evolving. If you're growing faster than that and you need to make some changes in your brand to support that growth, yes, you're going to piss off a bunch of your core, I always think of bands in this way, oh, they sold out. I know a lot of artists. I work with artists and all my artists, and it's like they all, we talk about this a lot. In a way, everybody's waiting for the moment to sell out. You just want to do it to the right place. You want to do it to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, so you're bona fide. Unfortunately, most of us artists end up selling out for $10 at the wrong moment, but that's another story. But yeah, it can be harmful. There'll be people that are core. I remember when you guys were just one place, and I loved it. But you know what? Most of those people won't support you financially. This is what we found anyway, personally. We've done a lot of work, a lot of nonprofit work, a lot of connecting with community. You have to do it because you love it. They're not going to give it back in the same way that you're looking for. So your core, like this core group at the beginning, pay homage to them, love them, do what you can. But if you have to grow, it's time to grow.
All right. Robert has a question in and around so much market focus seems to be on local.
I talked about expansion outside.
Oh, I thought we were talking to this one up here.
Work.
Well, let me repeat the question for the mic or for the other camera. So so much of the market focus seems to be local, loyal, connecting with customers, etc. Can you grow and expand outside your initial target audience? Actually, can that actually be harmful to your brand?
Yeah, so I was just saying it can be.
So I would say, growing pains not only, occur in small children, but they also occur in the evolution of a brand. So you're going to come to a point where, and I'm going to go to our friends that we've been talking to here locally, who part of their core that they are trying to deal with is that they are sustainable. They, that's kind of what they hung their hat on as part of the brewery and the beer image, is that they are locally harvested and sustainable. And now there's a demand for their beer on the East Coast. And so they're in a conundrum of finding out, okay, well, if I want to grow and expand into this other market, how do I deal with that? And we may have mentioned this before, but I want to revisit it. What they did is they found a way that made sense to live both to the brand promise of sustainability and local, and instead of shipping on semis across the country, they're looking at how can they use diesel trains and things that play and live more to their local brand message, but still allow them to move beyond the market that they exist in.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
I was going to say, I feel like in a saturated market like Portland for booze, local is going to be, like organic is kind of just, it's a secondary message. It's really important, but it's your secondary message. In smaller markets that are not saturated, it can be primary message. But you should buy because it's local. You should buy because it's organic. At least in the Portland market, we're finding only takes us so far. It's a great secondary message. Once I love your beer and then I discover it's also organic and also all local, my God, that's awesome. But you're trying to pitch me because of it, I just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Only because we hear it from so many corners, from every kind of food. But I visit my family in the outback of Montana, and it's not quite the same thing. They would love. They only do local.
Right. So, well, I think there's a West Coast bias to some extent when it comes to things like that. because this consumer, the psychographic profile of the consumer, more so in the West than maybe in other spots in the country, Montana, definitely not the same type of, like their thing would be, of course it's local. I've been a rancher here and I've done this in Montana forever and a day. Of course everything is close and local and I'm connected to my community. On the West Coast, the idea of marketing and pushing the idea of organic and local plays more to a kind of an underlying psychology of a need, because there is a distinction of pulling away from that kind of rural lifestyle.
I wanted to answer this question I thought was interesting about after you delivered your message. Joe was asking, after you delivered your message to your customers, what's a good way to measure the effectiveness of your message? It's a great question, and it's a question, it's great because lots and lots of customers ask this question. It seems simple, but it's not so simple. How do you measure it? It depends on the channel. That's the real question. So, I mean, the real answer is, so there are different, what we attempt to do as an agency is to set up metrics that are not all just tied to did they buy beer or not, because if we're here for the long haul, are brand metrics that are really important. So, the easiest way to track metrics, obviously, is all things Google Ads, all things online, all things digital. Otherwise, driving, why are people coming? We can ask customers. There's lots of surveys, lots of different ways. One thing I would not trust is anecdotal evidence from 2 or 3 people that walked in the room. And I want to tell you all a funny little story about this. Is last summer we had a customer we love, did some radio ads for them, and I had 2 or 3 of my friends just go in to the store and say, "Hey, I heard your radio ad," and that became, he loved us. He heard it from 2 or 3 of my friends. I told him what happened because I felt bad, but all he wanted to do was more radio. He was so affected by this idea that a couple people walked in, but it had nothing to do with reality. He never looked at the real metrics I sent. I didn't even really ask him for them. I had to go and explain what I did. So the point being, looking for metrics and not just using anecdotal evidence is a great idea. The cash register is the only real metric that matters to most of our smaller customers, by the way. So that's when you know. You'll know if it's working. And when we move into marketing and sales, this is what we do all day long. So we throw darts at a board until something hits, and when it hits, we pour money into it until it stops working. We don't really know why it worked, and we don't really know why it stopped working, but it does, and then we have to shift and find something else. You're like, just stick to the marketing basics and keep trying to connect with your core audience. And the real thing to me, your real, the future of all marketing and brand, I mean, it's already here, but it's your list. Track the people that love you, support you. If you send something out in Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and somebody shares it and says, "Wow, I love this beer," you need to find a way to capture that, put them into the system, and make sure that they are always updated. Never deny your core customer the opportunity to support you. You need to share the information, and you need to treat them like they are, they are your business. You need give them, and then one caveat on top of that is increase the value of everything. Do not give anything away. No coupons, no living social deal, none of that crap. Don't do it. Don't give anything away. Increase the value, increase the price tag, and convince people to come in is the better way to go.
The energy that you spend chasing all those coupons down could be much better spent on improving the value of your perception of your brand, I think.
I say that with, after 20 years of working with retailers and 10 years of just banging out what works, it never works. It works to drive a bunch of cash flow. If you need a bunch of cash flow, it works. That's a different kind of conversation than branding, but
brand, it's always horrible. It crushes your brand. So
All right.
don't do it.
So we got about a little over 10 minutes left. What I'm going to do is speak to, since a lot of these folks are kind of coming in or breaking in, how do I experiment with my brand early on? What can I do that won't harm me in the long run, but can help me get to the right place when it comes to the core of my brand?
I think the fastest approach is modeling, or as a friend of mine calls, condor marketing. Go to a market that you're not in, find a beer that you think resembles something you're doing, and cop shit out of it. That's what a lot of people do. It works. It's called modeling. A lot of big books have been written about it. I mean, it works. Seriously. That's one way to go about it. What you have to test it. There's a lot of testing. I mean, John's a much better resource than I am with this. I mean, I go to him when I ask these questions, but there are 1,000 lightweight, scalable resources that offer real testing in real ways. But ultimately, it's the brand will be built around your product in this case, and your product is the flavor, the taste profile. What does that look like? That's a huge. I mean, that's the core of your brand. What are you trying to do with your product? And
well, we're going to get to those in just 2 seconds. I want to wrap the early experimentation. So I think as a new and emerging brand, you have some opportunities fairly early on to do things. So if you have a pub on 1st and Main, maybe what you do is you go to another city on 3rd and not on Main, and you play around a little bit, and you experiment with kind of that brand proposition that you send out to people on a Saturday market or whatever those kind of situations look like. And you kind of see what resonates with folks, and then you bring that to 1st and Main. And you already have a sense of yourself because you know what your product is going to be. And I'm making the assumption that you are the entrepreneur, you are the brewer, you are at that sense. If you're not that person, what you need to do is pick at that person. You need to pull that out of them of what that is, and that may take a little bit of doing. But let's.
One of the barometers I use when I'm talking to the founders of businesses is we'll do extensive interviews and talk, and we'll hit some moment where they just become absolutely passionate about what they're talking about. And all the rest of the stuff I ignore. I just go after the passion, and it almost works every time. It's like a little secret. It's so simple, But you need to be able to. It helps when you don't have a connect. As an outsider, I can come in and talk to people. Sometimes it's hard if it's your boss or the founder or something. Something about a third-party energy coming in can work sometimes to get down to the core nuggets. But I mean, you probably know from like what's that passion moment, and if you figure that out, that's really that's what it is. That's the brand. That's the authentic moment that people will trust you when they hear it because it's passionate and it's authentic.
It's the care and the crafting. It's whenever that comes through. Moments.
Yeah, Robert Butler, who's a writer, not a brewer, but talks about the white-hot desire of the core audience. How do you get to this sort of deep desire, white-hot passion?
All right, so there's a couple questions that I'm going to kind of blend together because they've come. So local and organic seems to be more expectation in the Northwest rather than a branding opportunity. And then,
That's pretty funny, Dennis. I'm with you.
Yeah, they'll slap an organic label on anything if they can sell it to people in Lake Oswego, but that's a local joke. To that point, Dennis, I'm curious as to how organic and local labels play out in the Midwest, e.g. Ohio, in comparison to the Pacific Northwest. So I can speak to this. I actually used to live in Cleveland. I wasn't old enough to drink when I lived in Cleveland, so there is a little bit of disconnect. But there is a different reality, and you're a New York boy, actually. You know, Syracuse is not. So kind of this is more of a Midwest.
Not Syracuse.
Well, no, I know you come from Connecticut, but you went to Syracuse, right? Rutgers. Sorry. Anyways, I've digressed. The idea is speaking to how it plays out in the Midwest as compared to the Northwest. And I think it's really an evaluation of that market and understanding, is every one of your competitors using organic and locally harvested sustainable? I can go on for days.
Bob's comment. It's interesting.
I would say look at the market, see if it is being used. And if it's not, it may be a good thing or it may be a bad thing. Maybe it does not respond well to that local market. And maybe it's an untapped opportunity for you. So,
fried beer. I want to come for fried beer.
Yeah, the fried Twinkie beer may be the most successful in your market, depending upon how it is, how things are perceived. Again, having just moved from the Maryland area, I think it would do well in Maryland. They're just starting to push the local and organic scene. They just passed farmhouse brewery law last year. Based on that law, I would think Ohio would be similar. So yeah, there's some process of actual formulation of product in the craft brewing industry that may play to that as well, in and around that idea of farmhouse brewing.
I have a lot of family in Atlanta, and I concur with Bob's note. Organic is a dotted minuscule. That's Atlanta.
Well, I grew up in the South, so we go down there, and fried Twinkie beer might actually finally beat out Budweiser as an option. But I don't mean to insult the people of the South. There are some really great, yes, fried Snickers. You're going exactly where my brain, like remembering in high school when I walked through the fair, the things that just like.
I'm not sure. I'm just remembering though. I went to a brew pub and I can't remember the beer now. We went to a pub and they only had one beer that was brewed locally, and I remember saying, "Oh, I'll take that one." And then there was a whole conversation that broke out about, I guess, the only local beer you could get that's crafted nearby. This wasn't Atlanta though. This was in a suburb of Atlanta. I don't remember the name. Some suburb of Atlanta. But you couldn't, it's like we got both kinds, Bud and Bud Light.
Exactly.
So, I think they were buying it more for the small batch crafted taste. Had nothing to do with local. The fact that it was local was cool, but they wouldn't buy for that.
Well, I think there's also
But you could get away with the simple stuff in Atlanta, like flavor. Our beer tastes good. That could work.
There's only 25 breweries in Georgia.
Nice.
Lots of opportunity. You do have a hill to climb, though. You have to get them past the large brewer, traditional, I drank Schlitz.
Bob, agreed. Yeah.
Money does help. And what's interesting is to watch the bigs like Blue Moon and some of these others come in and be like, oh, hey, Georgia, here's a craft beer made by the same people that make other beer. We're just calling it craft and doing some other things.
I think what's really interesting, one note to maybe end on if you guys have questions around is a lot of times growing the brand and growing the business and selling the beer are all, if you don't have the upfront dollars to spend to build a brand and then wait a year because you're only going to do brand awareness and then unleash beers on your market, if you have but otherwise they kind of grow, everything will grow kind of simultaneously. And if you can figure out the mechanisms, like a lot of times we look at, what are we really trying to do? Well, we need to, get our monthly, cash flow to a certain point, and we can look and just say, okay, it looks like, on Fridays at the brew pub is the busiest. Why is that? Can we replicate that on Saturday?
a lot of times we come down to a simple, wow, did you realize the average money that somebody spends means we only really need like 12 more people per week to walk in. Let's focus on that instead of this like big imaginative, like, you know, it becomes a very simple process. Wow, I think I can go walk outside and tell 12 people to walk in each week and it'll work, you know. And I would urge you that also think about these simple ways to drive results for yourself. But it requires the initial process of brand, slowing down, studying, doing a deep audit. We didn't talk much about auditing, but uncovering all of the information should deliver a lot of this information that you can study and look at. A lot of that stuff on the rational brand driver side. Where are my fans coming from? How are they walking in the door? All the basics, and then how are they being treated? Let's call that the brand. And how can we, little by little, get 20% of the customers to buy one more beer? You know, mechanisms that can entice growth are sometimes simpler, is what I'm saying, than we imagine them to be. Because they're so simple, we kind of ignore them. Or just go, yeah. But you're saying yeah, but we're not doing the simple stuff, you know. And it's the consistency. It's a marathon. It's day in, day out, week in, week out. So I wish you guys all success. If you have any other questions.
All right, we're at 7. You guys need to bounce off. I completely understand. We'll hang out for a few more minutes, answer any other questions that might come in, and you know, good night to everybody else.
I remember blue laws in New Jersey. That's hysterical.
Yeah, blue laws. I remember in the South, certain counties that you can't go, and you know, on just crazy laws that are on the books. You wouldn't go drink in the bar that night. You'd go to the moon. You know, you get the spirits out of the radiator from Larry or whatever. You know,
gotta go Sharks. That's go Beavs is what we should be in. No.
No, to you,
Oh, sorry, Ducks. No Beavs. You would have loved this morning's.
No.
Go Beavs. There you go, Wyatt.
As long as they don't play the Ducks, I totally root for the Beavers. I'm platypus right up until the moment that, well, we got to kick their butt. Going back to the comment about using coupons, couldn't you use that as a gimmick to bring in product awareness, i.e. 10% discount tonight on extra?
Yeah, definitely. You know, for brew pubs, it always works. You know, it's a ladies' night, all that kind of stuff. It's just to recognize that what we want to do for brand is increase the value of what somebody's receiving, and therefore they will pay more for it. What we don't want to do is decrease the value by giving stuff away, because a lot of people will show up that will never show up again. You know, 90% of our traffic comes from a 5-mile radius. We do a coupon, we get traffic from a 15-mile radius that will never come back. Is that what we want? Maybe, if we need to drive numbers tonight for cash flow. But usually it results in a loss, ultimately, too many times we discovered.
We spend a lot of money to put more food on the table or whatever to do this thing because we're driving these things, and then they kind of fade. And
yeah, there's a lot of instances where it works well, but it really requires a budget and a risk, you know, factor, and you need to study the market by spending some money.
Now, Pat, that is brilliant. So this is where you get really wicked smart about understanding the value of things beyond just the dollar they hand you. This is why Facebook exists. It's the value of data. So would you use these incentives to get emails and contact information? Yeah, that actually, to me, might be a better way for you to.
I love the idea of incentivizing super fans always. I give people cool reasons. They don't want to feel like it's marketing, but cool reasons to promote us, to reach out, to be a part of our experience. So for super fans, yeah, I would give them hats and T-shirts and beers and all kinds of stuff. But because they're labeled as super fans, you're going to get something from these folks. Mm-hmm. This is not a one-way game here.
they will actively tell their friends to go to the bar tonight. And so for those folks, yes, incentivize actively.
So he was going exactly where I was going. So the caveat on this is like us on Facebook for a chance to win a free iPad. Well, tons and tons of people will do that. But are those people that you really want? You want what you want are the super fans. So don't necessarily incentivize everyone. But if some guy comes in and fills his growler for the 5th time, maybe that growler for the 6th time you get some sort of discount. So look at the opportunities to offer a value while still maintaining a perceived higher value in the overall market. All right, guys, I need to let him get back to his family, so I need to do the same. Thanks again, and have a good one.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.